Okay, we start. Ready? The sound is good? Yeah. Then it's not easy to present this friend, Eugenio Tisselli. Especially I want to say that I'm really happy today because with this lecture we start a very important collaboration with Eugenio in our Student in Advanced Interaction. He will be part of the group lab, will be part of the team of the teachers to follow the creative process in our Student in Advanced Interaction. This is very, very, very important for us. I think his collaboration will be very crucial. Another thing I want to say is about the plurality. Normally, we talk about a lot of concepts about technology, community, etc. And I think it's becoming very nice to start to talk about the technologies, the knowledges, for example, the societies in plural. This way, I think the point of view, the Eugenio's point of view about the use of the technology in the society is very, very important. I don't want to read this CD because it's very long. Of course, it's important, but I want to say Eugenio is a very, very important programmer. He's a very good artist. He's a poet. He's a very good teacher. He collaborates a lot of times in a very important master in UPF here in Barcelona in electronics arts. And now we are very happy because he came back to live in Barcelona. He comes from Mexico. It's a pleasure to living in Barcelona again with him and share this I don't know how to say this adventure to know something about the relationship between the technologies, the human behavior, the society, etc. Thank you very much for accepting all the invitation for being part of our team, and this is your pleasure. Thank you very much for all of you. And this is Eugenio Tisselli, my brother.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, Carlos, brother. Oops. Hope I don't break anything. If you allow me, I prefer to stand up. So maybe that way you will not sleep. Thank you, Carlos, and everybody here at IAAC for having me tonight. For me, it's very, very important to be here because, as Carlos said, this is like the first step in my collaboration with IAAC, which is a very important step for me. I'm very fortunate to have been invited to collaborate here with you and to be part of the team. So for me, it's a very special evening today. So as you will see, I'm part of the ROG Agency for Culture in Berlin, but now perhaps I can say that I am also part of IAAC. So I'm very, very happy to be here. So as Carlos said, I am a programmer. I always like to present myself as a programmer. I don't say I'm an engineer because that sounds like build me a bridge or build me a road or something like that. I'm a programmer. I like to write code. That's the really good thing that I can do. So that's what I'm good for. So that's also my lens from which I see the world. Whether I like it or not, I always see things in terms of code, whether it's to sort of love code and try to rationalize things, or hate code and say where everything is too codified and we should break the code. I have this love-hate relationship with code and technology, but never mind, that's my own problem. You shouldn't worry about that. So what I'm going to talk about today is well, one of the latest projects I have been involved with, and perhaps to me the most important one. It's an ongoing project. It started some years ago, but it's still going on. And in order to talk about this project in a fruitful way, in a way that could relate to what you're doing, to what you're thinking, I decided to title my talk Knowledge is Economics, which of course is a very general and perhaps a very pretentious title of a talk, because it's too large, it's too far-reaching. What is knowledge and what is commons? Well, Carlos, while he was presenting me, he mentioned that there are knowledges with a plural. In fact, that word doesn't exist in English, actually. If you look it up in the dictionary, it's always knowledge. You cannot really speak about knowledges. But I think we should speak about knowledges. And that's what I'll try to say today, that there are many, many different kinds of knowledges. And that one thing that we can do is to build bridges between these systems of knowledge because they're mostly unconnected. So that's one part, and that refers to ways of knowing, which are related to ways of being in the world, ways of existing, and in particular, how farmers in Tanzania exist and know the world and exist in the world and act in the world. So that's one part I'm going to talk about. And the other part is commons. So commons is sort of becoming a buzzword lately, especially here in Barcelona. The government, the city government is all for the commons. So you perhaps have heard a lot about commons here and there, and perhaps you know about commons and have worked in some enterprise or initiative that has to do with the commons. But just to generalize, I'm sure you know about it, but commons here is referred to resources that could be natural or could be made by humans, and that should be accessed by all, that everybody should have access to that resource. So therefore, it should be free, it should be defended from appropriation. So that's the understanding of commons here. So when you think about knowledge is commons, you start thinking about, well, knowledges are commons. That means that we should all have access to knowledge in a free way and that we must defend it from appropriation. Well, that's sort of to give you a mood from where I start. But I want to take things to more. As I said, I'm a programmer, so I've been living with computers since I was 10 years old. I was programming since I was 10 years old. And just to let you know, I'm 44 years old. I always forget things that happen with the age. So when I was 10 years old, computers were actually a rare thing to have in your house. So I started programming with paper and pen, writing them code, paper and pen. That's how I started. So that's my level of relation to the code. It's really intimate for me. So perhaps people could relate to code and say, well, that's a very cold thing for engineers. For me, it's really my way of expressing myself. That's my knowledge. Of course, it's not mine, but it's the knowledge in which I participate. Okay? So once, many years ago, I don't remember when, I was in the highlands of Chiapas in Mexico. And suddenly it sort of hit me. And I asked myself, well, if I had to live here, what could I do? Well, at that time, there were no computers there. So I said, well, what am I good for, apart from coding? So that's when I said, well, I will, of course, love to learn about farming and learn to do many, many other things. But the real challenge was, how can I do something that could be useful here in such a place without leaving my knowledge as an engineer, as a coder? So that's where it all started, basically, but that was just a thought that sort of got things going. Then I got involved in different projects that had to do with communities and mobile phones and the internet. I started in 2003 a collaboration with a Catalan artist called Antonio Abad. And for 7 years we worked together in a project called Megafone, which worked with different communities around the world. And the idea was to work for a short period of time with these communities, which were very diverse among themselves, and to sort of propose to them a medium that wasn't filtered so that they could make their voices heard through mobile phones, by taking pictures or recording audio, sending everything to a web page that was accessible to the public. So that's how I actively got involved with communities. So we work with very, very different communities. We work, for example, with taxi drivers in Mexico City in 2004. We work with disabled people, well, it's not really the right word to say, I'm sorry. People in wheelchairs in Barcelona in 2005. Many, many other groups, ranging from immigrants, refugees. And to me, there was something that was missing there. I said, well, it's fine. I mean, it's a very interesting project, but I need more engagement. I need to feel more involved in a specific type of community, in a specific type of problem, because we jumped from one community to another. So in 2010, my collaboration in this project ended, and I decided to go along that path. I mean, working with technology, with different communities, and specifically with communities at risk of social exclusion, which is a form of exclusion that has many, many different factors, which can be economic, which can be cultural, which can be many, many different types, even environmental. So I decided to go on with this type of projects and decided also to focus on food. So food is important. It's important for me, it's important for you, it's important for everybody. And the moment I realized the importance of food and how wrong are the models which we use to produce food today, then I decided that that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with communities, farmers, small-scale farmers, not just to go out and help. That's a very pretentious thing. I actually wanted to learn from them. I actually wanted to survive, to be able to learn the tools of survival in a world that, as you know, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but as you know, things are collapsing. So I believe farming is one of the basic skills that we should all acquire. So let's see if this works. It does work. So in 2010, beginning in 2011, I got involved in a transdisciplinary group of research. I don't really like to use the word transdisciplinary. I prefer cross-community, because there are some forms of knowledge that are outside academic disciplines, but never mind. I was able to work together with environmental scientists, agronomists, ecologists, and myself in the quality both of a programmer and also artist. So we had a chance to work in Tanzania. When I learned that we had the chance to work in Tanzania, first thing I did was to go to a map and see where was Tanzania, because my extreme ignorance, I did not know where Tanzania was. So I found it's there. And it's quite relevant, the geographical location of Tanzania. Just not just showing off that I know where it is in the map. Yeah, now I know where it is in the map. Yeah, but it's very relevant that Tanzania is there because my hand is a bit shaky, you'll see, but this sort of imaginary lines here sort of define a strip of desert, the Sahara Desert, which is actually many names, but is a desert strip, very, very large, across here, more or less. And it's growing because of many factors, including climate change, but also deforestation due to exploitation of wood and many, many other things, also mining. So Kenya is a country in the north of Tanzania, and Kenya is already suffering from droughts. People are not finding enough food to eat because there is not enough water. The weather is getting drier, the temperatures are rising, the rain is not enough to feed the crops. So, and the really big problems, for example, in 2008, happened here in Somalia. In Somalia, there was a tremendous drought in 2008. So refugees had to flee from Somalia, go to Kenya. And in Kenya, well, things got more and more complex because many of these refugees started to become radicalized politically and ideologically also. So many of the problems that you hear about in Kenya, the terrorist attacks and many of the conflict that is going on, has to do a lot with climate change, with the effects of climate on the weather of Somalia, which causes immigration, which on the other hand has also caused conflict. Now, I'm not saying that this has to happen all the time, and I'm not implying that immigration is dangerous, etc., etc. I'm not implying anything. I'm just sort of reflecting on a chain of events that happened and that reach Somalia, are reaching Kenya, and are about to reach Tanzania. So I'm sure you've heard about climate change. Some people call it global warming because on average, the temperature of the world will increase by 2 or 4 or 6 degrees, depending on what we do today. So if we try to cut emissions today, we might make it to a 2-degree increase in 100 years, but if we don't cut emissions, it will get worse, etc. So I'm sure you've heard about this. But the point is that calling this effect global warming is actually misleading, because not everywhere the temperature is going to rise. And that's where the complex effects of weather come in. Weather is a complex system. It's not a linear system. So it doesn't mean that temperature is going to rise uniformly in every corner of the world. Actually, the weather behaves in such a complex way that some areas of the world might get colder, there might be more rain in some parts of the world, but there might be less rain in some parts of the world. So what the scientists who study climate change are doing is they're building high-resolution models of climate change. And what does this mean? It means that they're trying to figure out what is going to happen here in Barcelona, and more specifically here in Pompeu Fabra. And why? Because, of course, we want to adapt. We cannot stop climate change anymore, so we want to adapt to the effects of climate change. And in order to adapt to the effects of climate change, we need to know what is going to happen in a specific place, because you cannot propose a general strategy to adapt to climate change. It has to be localized. So how are these scientists doing these high-resolution models of climate change? Well, they're actually going out there and trying to take some measurements, of course, temperature, rainfall, wind speed, vegetation, etc. Many quantitative data. Right? So with this quantitative data, they feed this data into their models, and then they try to find out what is going to happen in a specific location. But the really important thing, or maybe a very important and complementary thing to quantitative data, is qualitative data, stories, or what is actually happening that cannot be included into a very complex equation. So here you can see a well that is going dry. This is a well, this is a picture that we took in my first visit to Tanzania. I'm going to tell you about it in a while. And it's a well that is running dry, meaning that the rainfall has, the levels of rainfall have decreased. So the farmer has less and less water to water the crops. So that can be measured. Of course, you can measure rain in a very simple way. You can make homemade rainfall sensors, meters. That's a really easy thing to do, so you can do it everywhere. But the really complex things happen here at this level. The complex, unexpected, unforeseeable, strange effects. So what you're seeing here is a yucca plant. Yucca, also called cassava or manioc, comes from Brazil. Originally, it was introduced in Africa 200 years ago. And what you're seeing here is the white flag. This flag, it's, as its name implies, it's a small white fly. And the white fly is the vector. This means that it's the transmitter of a viral disease called the mosaic disease, which is deadly for the cassava plants. And why is it related to climate change? Because the little white fly reproduces more in dry weather. So if it rains less, then the weather will be drier and the white fly will proliferate much more. Therefore, there is a higher incidence of mosaic virus disease. And these are the complex and unexpected effects that we wanted to look at in Tanzania. And the only way to look at these things is to go there and talk to the farmers and ask them and let them explain to us what is really happening and what is that they are experiencing in their farms. So the idea, as you can probably imagine, was to create a system of communication between farmers and scientists. That was the original idea, where farmers could actually tell the scientists working in their labs what was actually happening on the ground. Now, you might know about this, but it happens all the time. Sounds pretty incredible, but many scientists who are well-meaning, they develop solutions for the third world without ever setting foot in the third world. So, for example, there is a case scientists in a lab in Zurich who are trying to develop a type of cassava that was resistant to pests. So they developed the manioc, the cassava, in the lab, and when it was working, they did some lab tests. They took it to Tanzania and they did some trials there, and they said, well, we bring you a cassava that is resistant to all the pests. And then the farmer said, well, yes, let's try it. And they found out that it was actually resistant to some of the pests that attacked the cassava, but there was one problem. They couldn't eat it. It tasted terrible. So the scientists never went there and asked, what kind of taste do you like? And here is where the sensitive part comes in. Taste, quality, texture. This is important. I mean, we could have food that is resistant to pests, and wow, that will cut the costs of pesticides and the pollution caused by pesticides, but probably it's tasteless. Yeah, and we probably were already eating some bad stuff, I don't know. So the thing is to actually build this bridge of communication between two forms of knowledge. That was the original idea. So, okay, I'm going to skip this blah, blah, blah. And January 2011, I went there with my colleague, Angelica Hilbe. She's one of the foremost experts in biosafety. She's one of the foremost experts on the effects of GMOs and also an agroecologist. So she's really my collaborator, my advisor, my partner. And with the help of Dr. Flora Ismail from the University of Dar es Salaam, the capital city of Tanzania, we contacted a group of farmers who were gathered there. Yeah, the farmers were gathered there, and I was there explaining to the farmers the idea of what we wanted to do together. The idea was to invite them to see if they wanted to participate in a project where they would use mobile phones and the internet to document the effects of climate change, publish them on a web page, and have some sort of feedback to the local researchers. So you might be thinking about, well, what is actually the access to these technologies in a farm in Tanzania where there probably are no roads, no water, no electricity. And then you might think, well, mobile phones, internet. And that's the same question I was asking myself the first time I went to Tanzania. So I went to the farms. And then I asked the farmers, well, have you used mobile phones? And then they would bring 3 or 4 mobile phones from their pockets, just like this. Of course, not all of them the newest model, but they are using mobile phones perhaps as intensively as we are. And it's quite logical. In a country where there are no roads, you don't actually go and tell somebody, blah, 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 I need this, I need that. You call them. It's quite cheap to call. The rates are really competitive, so it's really something that is affordable. Mobile banking, you might know about it, or you might not know about it, but it was actually invented in Kenya, which is just north of Tanzania. M-Pesa, mobile money, Pesa means money, it was invented there. So they use mobile phones also for economic transactions. They use mobile phones in a very intensive way. They power them with solar energy, with the little flags of solar energy. And regarding the internet, perhaps here you don't see their faces, but most of the farmers were aged between 30 and 40 years old. So none of them knew about the internet directly. They heard about the internet, but their children had access to the internet for the first time in schools. So there was also sort of opportunity to bring together the children also and say, well, maybe the children can teach you how to use this. So when we explained the project to the farmers, they asked about all the doubts that they had. They asked a very, very important question, which was, will this project bring water from above or from below? And of course, it's an ironic question, meaning what sort of solution do you want to offer us? And at some point we said, well, we are not offering a solution. We are not offering a magical project that will improve your life just in the course of a few days. We're just saying that we should talk to each other a little bit more. That's basically the thing. So the farmers got together, they talked, and they decided that they wanted to actually participate in the project. We named the project Sauti ya Wakulima, which means the voice of the farmers in Swahili. And that's a webpage. You could write it down, or maybe I can give it to you later if you want to browse through the webpage when you're at home. All the contents that farmers uploaded from the phones to the web, you can find them there. The website is still active, but I'm going to tell you how the website became what it is now. Because if you remember, I told you the original goal was to create a documentation about the effects of climate change, but the farmers turned things around in a very nice way. I will tell you how it happened. So The project is not only about technology, and this is very, very important. There is an app, and there is also a web page, but there is also a methodology that involves different ways of organizing, of getting together, of talking, of coordinating. So this person in the middle is Mr. Hamza Suleiman. He is the local coordinator of the project. He is the one that makes sure that everybody knows how to use the phone, everybody understands what the project is about. And here around him are some of the farmers that decided to participate. We started off with a small group, 10 people, 5 men and 5 women. And we started with 2 phones. You see this phone is still an old Nokia. This is from 2011. This is interesting because at some point we had to switch to the newer smartphones, and now we're using whatever Android operating system. And we decided to provide 2 phones for 10 people. So you might be asking, well, of course, I mean, you want to save money. Yes, in part that's the right answer, but that was not the only reason. For me, the most important reason was to create a space where the mobile phone could be redefined as a communal tool. So if you think about the mobile phone, and if you think about the story of telecommunications, think, for example, about the telephone. You had telephones in your home, I think. And the telephone was shared by all of your family, right? Or if you had a telephone in your office, well, it was shared by all of your colleagues. And what happened with the mobile phone, that this sort of shared space of communication became individualized. Okay, sorry, thank you. So the mobile phone represents a very important paradigm that is shaping the design of technology today, which is individualism. And of course, this is nothing new. But it is very, very interesting to see how in the 60s, Marcuse, for example, exalted individualism against the uniformity of the communist regime, for example. Against the uniformization, he exalted the individual. And we had to be all individual, we all had to be stars, we all had to be special. And it is very, very interesting to see how absolute capitalism has appropriated the idea of individualism as a liberating force and turned individualism into a commodity. And the symbol for me, the most powerful symbol today is the mobile phone. It's the individual means of communication that asks you to always be connected and to always be available and to always be there, available for work or for whatever. So the thing is, if we try to imagine together that if we redefine the mobile phone as a communal shared tool, we could sort of re-inscribe the values that are embedded into technology, which is something that probably needs a little bit of elaboration, but I'll sort of just try to play with that for now, and create some sort of sense of compromise that if it's a shared tool, then I not only have to take care of it, but I also have to use it in a way that is relevant for everybody. That's also what we wanted to look at and see if it could work or not. So what did the farmers start to do? They took the phones, they went to visit the farms of other farmers, and they started asking them, well, what effects of climate change are you experiencing? And here, for example, is a farmer that is saying, well, there used to be 2 rainfall seasons, and now there is only 1 rainfall season, and that is, of course, a problem because the water in my well is running low. And that's a very, very real problem for him. For this woman, she was asked, what did she recommend to others? What should we do about climate change? And she said, well, the government should build infrastructure, and the farmers should try to diversify the crops so that they could use crops that are water efficient and that they rely on water less and less. So Whether or not you agree with her, that's her opinion. And that's her voice coming out, her idea of what should be done. Okay? So this is what you're looking at are pictures coming from the website. And the text here is the transcription of the original audio. Now the software tool included on the phone, the app, allows you to take a picture, record an audio message, and send everything to the web page. So, of course, the original messages were in Swahili. We worked with a translator, and this is the translated transcription of her message. Okay, we wanted this project not to be only extractive, in the sense that we're going to get the stories and the opinions and the voices of farmers, and then we're going to give them to the scientists, and then they're going to do whatever. But we also wanted the farmers to participate in the project in a way that the information became valuable to them as well, not only for the scientists, but for the farmers. So this is a picture that they took. They are gathering in an agricultural station, which is in the middle of the forest. It's a place where they usually gather. They have a computer there, they have an internet connection, which is slow, but works. And they decided to gather every Monday to look at the webpage and see what other people have published on the website. And also to exchange the poems. So they coordinated this exchange. We sort of got this going, and it sort of became an autonomous process with time. But eventually something very interesting happened. When the farmers started interviewing other farmers, they realized something very, very important. That everybody who was being interviewed, in some way or another, shared a fragment of knowledge, a fragment of information which could be useful or not. And also that by interviewing people, they could actually socialize and know each other and perhaps build a greater sense of community, perhaps. So what they decided to do is to sort of switch the research goal, and instead of just focusing on climate change, he used the poems to socialize, to report problems, and to start a process of mutual learning. And this is something that we had not foreseen. This is something that the farmers actually saw. They saw that the project could be useful in that way, and they decided to transform the goals of the project, to appropriate the goals of the project, and to use it in such a way. So when that happened, I can tell you I was very happy, because what I wanted, let's say as an artist, was to create a space that could be autonomous and could be open-ended. That means that I didn't have a very specific goal in mind. So I was very happy that actually the farmers took the ends in their own hands and reshaped the project. But the scientists, they were curious. They said, well, they gave us funding to do a project that has to do with climate change, and now the farmers want to socialize. And I said, well, probably socializing is the best thing that you can do to face climate change. Because if you exchange knowledge, then you can learn something from someone that is vital for what you're doing. And of course, we were gathered here in this institution, and we share knowledge here. But if you think about how the farmers live, they live in farms which are very far away from each other. They do have a place where they can gather here. But sometimes when they gather, they have so many things in their minds, so many things to worry about, that they just talk about other things. And probably there is someone who has the solution that I'm looking for, and I don't know that. I'm just facing that person, and I don't even think about asking that question to that person. So I'm going to tell you an anecdote that will explain this process, and hopefully will illustrate what actually happened. This man is Mr. Haishi Shabani. He's one of the original participants of the project. And when I visited his farm originally, we saw his maize field. After cassava, maize is the second most important crop. And actually the maize plants were not very good. And he said, yes, I'm having problems with my maize plants. Well, okay, that's too bad. But one Monday, when the farmers gathered at the Chambezi station, at the agricultural station, Mr. Shabani saw this picture on the website, and when he heard the audio, this is what he heard. This maize has been planted on terraces so as to prevent waterlogging. So waterlogging, if you don't know about it, the rainfalls, the water accumulates a small lake around the plant, and the maize plants, they need a lot of water, but if it's too much water, then they can drown. Drown. That's the word. So he said, well, probably this is what I'm not doing. I should make this little mounds. So he went there and actually asked the person who took the picture, well, why did you do it? And that person explained, well, you have to do it in such and such a way because otherwise your plants will drown, etc., etc. So almost 3 months later, Mr. Shabani followed the advice, and he sent this picture of his first successful harvest. So this is maize that I grow on terraces after getting advice from my colleague. I got advice on cultivating on terraces during the winter and not in the summer as previous. So there is much more information that he got just by asking, because the person who answered said, and you should also plant not in the winter but in the summer. So that, to my mind, underlines the importance of face-to-face interaction, because it's so much more than what is written on the web page. And, well, he had his first successful maize harvest. So when I knew about this, somebody explained what had happened. I said, well, how can this be? I mean, two people who know each other, how come they didn't speak about this before? And they said, well, probably when they get together, they talk about Barcelona and Manchester and or the price of oranges or the price of lemons. You know, and probably the right question that they need to ask needs a trigger, and an image can be a trigger. So that's the value of using images, and that's the value of using voice that can be accessed by all. That it can act as a trigger, and it doesn't mean that you can get all the knowledge just by looking at the web page. It means that the web page is a starting point or the trigger for other types of interaction. That's where it really gets interesting. So the project moved on. Of course, when the farmers realized that it was becoming useful for them, they started taking a lot of pictures, and they got really enthusiastic about it, to such an extent that even the government, local government, noticed what they were doing, and they gave them some grants to go and document an agricultural fair that was happening in another town. So they sort of became the official farmer journalists appointed by the local government, which was a very great source of pride for them. It was recognition for them. They felt recognized, they felt that they were known as the phone group, and they could show up the page to other farmers, and they could disseminate this knowledge. So they were actually happy to share information and to help the knowledge to circulate. So they got a grant. Of course, there are many, many things to say. I periodically went back to Tanzania because to me it's very important to be present, but not to be too present. And it's a very delicate balance there. If you ask an anthropologist will tell you you have to be in the community in order to understand what they're doing. But there is also a distorting effect there. The presence of the anthropologist is not neutral, never neutral. So what I wanted to achieve is a presence that could distort things as little as possible. And I recognize that there could be distortion, there has been distortion, but I always try to have the distortion minimized to level almost zero. But I came back very often. I went back to Tanzania very often for a period of 3 years. And I asked the farmers what did they think about the project, what was happening with the project. They told me very interesting things. They told me, for example, that they learned that computers could also be used by farmers to solve problems. They're not just a fancy thing for rich people in towns, which is quite an interesting thing to learn from farmers. And they also told me we have a lot of things to say, but no means where to say them. So at some point they regarded this space for communication as a way to make their voices heard, amplify their voices. Of course, they also said ways in which the project could be improved. And one of the things that kept coming up is that they wanted to include more people so that it could be more valuable. They said we should include people from different areas so we can learn from those people who are far away and they're doing different things. So that's when I became a travel agent. And what I did was organize trips of farmers of the original group to other parts of Tanzania so that they could see and invite other groups of farmers themselves. And this happened to some extent. In 2013 and 14, we went to Zanzibar, which is the island just off the coast of Tanzania. The farmers said, we want to go to Zanzibar because they have the same crops that we have. So we want to learn what they're doing, and we want also to show them what we're doing here. So I just arranged a trip, arranged meetings, arranged visits to farms, and we were able to integrate other groups of farmers in Zanzibar to the project. So this is where we're at now. This is the point where we're at. The project has not been very active for the last year, but for some reasons it is coming alive again. If you look at the webpage, there are some recent pictures, and to me this is very encouraging because there is hope that we can continue. We can. We're also thinking about extending to Kenya, and of course there are many problems here. Perhaps I have just talked about the happy things, but there have been a lot of drawbacks, which, if you want, I can tell you about later. But what I wanted to say here, really important, and perhaps, I don't know if I'm running out of time. Yeah, I'm running out of time. Yeah. So I just want to convey a very short and last message, which is why farmers? Why are farmers so important for me and actually for all of us? Perhaps you haven't heard of this study by an NGO, which is actually here in Barcelona, called Grain. Small farmers, such as the ones that we are working with, produce 80% of the world's food in less than 25% of the world's available land for farming. What this talks about is a monopoly. It means that the 75% of land available for farming is owned only by 20% of the farmers, usually in rich countries, which have large spaces for monoculture, mechanized, heavily technified agriculture. But they do produce 80% of the world's food. So when they tell you that small-scale farmers cannot feed the world, probably you could use this data to sort of start a discussion there, because perhaps they can. Perhaps small-scale farming is a way to feed the world in the future. Another thing is that this mainstream model of agriculture, which has 75% of the arable land in the world, is responsible for CO2 emissions between 44 and 57% of the total. So, of course, when I was telling you that the food model that we have is wrong, this is the reason why I think it's wrong. It's not just me, it's many people who are studying mainstream agriculture versus small-scale agriculture. So, why then should we turn to farmers? Well, in one way, we want to amplify what they're doing. We want to sort of not only help, but actually learn from what they're doing and see if we can actually do farming as they do in such a diverse and versatile way here in our cities. And we have to be very cautious, and I'm going to sort of run here, but there is a very nuanced rhetoric about development going on right now, and many projects that want to develop Africa. One of them is AGRA, Alliance for Green Agriculture Revolution in Africa. sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, sponsored by, yes, Monsanto. And the idea here is that what they're saying is that they will lift African farmers out of poverty, and that every African farmer should become an entrepreneur and play in the global market. So yes, entrepreneurship is gripping the imaginations of small-scale farmers, but this is something that we should all realize, that being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. Only people who have safety nets can be entrepreneurs. And if you don't have a safety net, try to start an enterprise and you fail, because most of enterprises fail, actually. And you're left with nothing. Then can you afford the risk? And is there a model that is an alternative to that of the entrepreneur? So one of the possible things that could become a model, and this is not something that we are going to teach to African people, is the model of the commons. We actually should learn from them. And I was reading today an article about a meeting that was held here in Barcelona with Ada Colau and many other representatives of the local government, and they were talking about the commons-based production model. And they say, yes, we should go the way of cooperatives. And what do the farmers in Africa do? They have cooperatives. They have lots of cooperatives. So the co-op model, which we are sort of rediscovering, is the model that they already have. And that's where we should really communicate on that level. Learn from the experience that they have had in the last years with cooperatives, and try to meet their experience with our need for cooperatives in order to disentangle this sort of dictatorship of competition, entrepreneurs, etc., etc. So, software involved in this project, just to finish very quickly, the name of the software is ojoVoz. It's open source. You can download it, you can try it, you can use it in your own projects. Then here, there are other projects that I've done. Some of them failed. I'm not showing the failed one, but I can talk about them later if you want. I've done a project with communities in Mexico, mostly around Mexico City, and that's it. Thank you very much. I hope I did.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very specific, very nice lesson about advanced interaction. Thank you very much. I think it's point of view about the use of the technology is really advanced. Not only we understand the advanced technology of our new technology or the last technology, but this is the military domain, I think, the last technology. But I think this point of view of the use of the technology in the communities is very, very important and very nice. Thank you very much. And now, of course, if anybody has some questions, I want to say, I'll say in the beginning, Eugenio, from now will be part of our faculty in the student advanced interaction. They will be part of the in this IAAC. If you want to contact in the moment, of course, it's absolutely viable. Then, if anybody has any question, of course, it's the moment. Okay.
I have the question you were telling about the connection, Pompeu and the adaptation of Pompeu in here. And you didn't mention it in the lecture, and I'm curious about what did you want to tell about that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, it was just an example to sort of bring it home. You know, when we talk about climate change, it seems such a big thing, so removed from our daily life, that we sort of think, well, there's nothing I can do, really. I mean, it's, I can stop using plastic bags and try not to use cars, but it's such a big thing. And I find that this thing coming from science, that is building high-resolution models of climate change, is actually a way to connect our daily life, our daily existence, to a phenomenon that, if we think about it in global terms, it's too large. But if we think about it in local terms, then you can really relate to it. And the interesting part of this is that the scientists are still working on the high-resolution models of climate change. They have not finished doing the high-resolution models There was a high-resolution model of Switzerland that came out last year, and the resolution was like about 1 kilometer square, which is quite high resolution for climate model. But the climate change model for Pompeu is still to be done.
Hello, I wanted to know about the drawbacks of the project that you were telling about the beginning. The drawbacks. Yeah.
Okay. The drawbacks of South Iowa Colina or the previous project? This one. Okay. Many drawbacks. Okay. So I will try to exemplify a few of them. First one is the lack of funding, obviously. And in 2013, I had the opportunity of talking about this project in a conference that had to do with telecommunications technology and agriculture. This conference was held in Kigali, in Rwanda, and everybody there was saying, well, mobile phones are going to make a revolution in agriculture, and mobile phones are going to lift farmer opportunity out of poverty, and there is a lot of money to be made. So when I talked about this project, the first question that I was asked was, what is your business model? And I said, I don't have a business model. And they said, come on, how can you not have a business model? And to me, this was really puzzling, because in some way I am all the time struggling with money, all the time. I'm all the time struggling to find money to go on. And what has stopped, for the most part, us to continue and expand the project has been money. So of course, if I had a business model, I could get money, right? But how could you capitalize on the exchange of knowledge? I mean, that's something that I definitely don't want to do, and we all don't want to do with the farmers. We've all agreed that this is not about money. So this is a paradox that has to be solved. How can you sustain this sort of projects that don't generate revenue by themselves? And of course, probably someone will prove me wrong and say, well, you can't sustain this by doing this and this. And I'm really happy to hear about that. Anybody has a recommendation. But then there have been all kinds of drawbacks, some of them technical, in the sense that, yes, you can get mobile coverage in the middle of the Tanzanian forest. Yes, that's pretty amazing, but you can. But sometimes if the antenna gets hit by lightning or something like that, then you remain without internet for perhaps a month. That's also part of the normal cycle of things. So yes, of course, there are many technical difficulties. And then there was the problem of the smartphones. We really, when we introduced the smartphones there, this was a new thing for the farmers. And this is not an easy thing to do, because on one side you're saying, well, I'm bringing the latest technology, but on the other side, well, I'm also bringing a non-sustainable technology. And I'm also bringing desire. What I mean is, I'm also bringing the desire to have this technology. So it's a very sensitive thing to do, and this is of course not easy. And I'm very much willing to accept that this is a very problematic component of the project. But also a very much more practical component is that perhaps my hands are not too big, and our hands are more or less the same size maybe, but the hands of a farmer are really big. And when you give a touch screen to a farmer, then it's really difficult. Touch screens are not designed for farmers. That's one thing that you can tell. I think that those are the largest drawbacks. And of course, there are smaller ones. Like you always have to go through politicians if you want to do something there, and they're always asking for something. So that's also part of the reality that you have to deal with. Yeah. And if I can think about another right now, I'll tell you, but there are many drawbacks.
Okay. Okay, thank you again. Same like to say again. Thank you very much. I think it's a really good presentation. So this nice day in the area. Okay, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. And if you, for some reason, want to contact me or try out the tools, I'm available, watchable, and probably you'll see me around here in the very near future. Thank you.
Now start the karaoke.